Tantra really, in my best understanding, is a weaving of love. It's a weaving of life, of existence, of polarity into a place of love.
Tantra ist vielleicht einer der am häufigsten missverstandenen Begriffe überhaupt. Die meisten verbinden Tantra mit Sexualität und mysteriösen Sexpraktiken. Doch Tantra ist so viel mehr als das. Denn es geht um eine tiefgründige Intimität mit dem Leben selbst. Und zwar mit allem, was Leben ist. Mit Licht und Schatten, hell und dunkel, gut und böse, Liebe und Angst, Tun und Sein, Tag und Nacht, Denken und Fühlen und als Grundlage all dessen, als die ursprünglichste aller Polaritäten in unserer dualen Welt sozusagen, die Dynamik zwischen maskuliner und femininer Energien in uns Menschen, in der Natur und im ganzen Universum. Ich kann dir gar nicht sagen, wie sehr ich mich freue, dir in der heutigen Podcast-Folge Aaron Kleinerman vorzustellen, der uns genau darüber erzählen wird und um die gewaltige Power, die hinter all dem steckt. Schön, dass du da bist zu einer neuen Folge von 1000 First Steps, deinem Podcast für das Größte in dir. Aaron ist Tantra-Lehrer und Autor von The Embodied Man. Außerdem leitet er Retreats und Workshops auf der ganzen Welt. In der letzten Podcast-Folge habe ich im Live-Update über einige der emotionalen Wellen erzählt, die mich seit meiner Ankunft in Bali in teilweise sehr heftige Wipeouts gestürzt haben. Ich mag diese Analogie zu den Wellen zum Surfen immer ganz gern, wenn es dich so richtig durchwirbelt und du nicht weißt, wo oben und unten ist. Es war Aarons Workshop zum Thema Power und Polarity, zu dem mich das Leben auf wundersame Weise geführt hat, der für mich zu keinem besseren Zeitpunkt hätte stattfinden können. Es war ein intensives Wochenende mit Praktiken, Ritualen und Teachings, mit denen mich Aaron genau dort abgeholt hat, wo ich es gerade gebraucht habe. Nicht in einer airy-fairy spirituellen Sphäre, sondern in der handfesten, teils turbulenten und erdigen Welt von Emotion, Verkörperung und den Polaritäten der menschlichen Erfahrung. Down to earth, sehr anwendbar, sehr praxisnah, sehr nah am Leben und daher absolut transformativ. Und wenn ich mal an etwas angedockt bin, und so tick ich einfach, von dem ich spüre, dass es gerade richtig ist für mich auf meinem Weg, dann folge ich diesem Ruf in der Regel, ohne zu viel darüber nachzudenken. In diesem Fall war der Ruf so klar, wie ich es selten gespürt habe in meinem Leben. Und nur eine Woche nach dem Workshop war ich dann also im Dschungel von Bali, inmitten der Insel, an einem wunderschönen Ort, neben einem Fluss, an einem Wasserfall, umringt von Natur und 24 Brothers, anderen Männern und einer so wunderschönen, tiefgründigen, innigen Connection zu diesen anderen Männern bei dem Retreat von Aaron, bei seiner Initiation Journey, einem 7-tägigen Tantra Men's Retreat, von dem ich ein paar Tage zuvor noch nicht mal gewusst habe, dass es das gibt. Das Leben hat mich dorthin geführt und ich bin einfach so dankbar, dass ich diesem Ruf gefolgt bin. In diesem Interview heute hörst du, warum, was es mit mir gemacht hat, aber noch viel mehr geht es um Aaron, um seinen Weg. Er erzählt uns im Gespräch über seine Erfahrungen, wie er sich vom Navigator als Schiffskapitän auf großen Oceanlinern, Frachtschiffen, mit denen er um die Welt gefahren ist, wie er sich von dort zum Seelennavigator als Tantra-Coach und als Lehrer entwickelt hat. Und wie Tantra sein Leben, seinen Umgang mit sich selbst und anderen, seine Arbeit, seine Beziehungen und nicht zuletzt sein Sexleben von Grund auf verändert hat. Mit seiner Arbeit hilft Aaron den Menschen, ihre inneren Anteile zu erkennen und mit ihnen auf gesunde Art und Weise umzugehen. Er geht auch darauf ein, warum es eben so vielen von uns so schwer fällt, welche Konditionierungen da eine Rolle spielen, unsere Emotionen zu fühlen und sie eben auch entsprechend zu verarbeiten und zu kanalisieren.
Wow, there's a deep area for more integrity necessary, as well as I started to see a lot of the deepest areas of people's conditioning around their base chakras and their conditioning around sex, around money, around power.
Ein powervolles wie augenöffnendes Interview gleichermaßen, bei dem die Chancen wirklich gut stehen, dass du danach einen völlig neuen Zugang hast zu der einen oder anderen Dynamik, die sich in deinen Beziehungen vielleicht abspielt, insbesondere in der Beziehung zu dir selbst, zu deinem Körper und zu deinen Emotionen. Alle Links zu Aarons Retreats, zu seinen Workshops, seinem Buch und seiner Arbeit findest du natürlich in den Shownotes. Lass mich wissen, wie dir das Interview gefallen hat und was du dir daraus mitnimmst, wie immer sehr gerne auf Instagram @jakob.horvath unter dem Post zur Folge. Und jetzt wünsche ich dir ein paar spannende Aha-Momente und eine richtig gute Zeit. Ladies and Gentlemen, please welcome Aaron Kleinerman. Right, brother, now it's my turn to say, take a little breath in.
Yeah.
And sigh it out. Oh, beautiful. That is what we have been doing a lot of times in the past week. Taking a deep breath in, sighing it out with sound. Welcome to the podcast, Aaron.
Great to be here.
So happy to have you. I wanted to invite you already 2 weeks ago after the workshop we did. I felt like the work was so profound. 2 days, and I felt different in my body. Then you came up with this idea of the men's retreat only 5 days later, a Tantra men's retreat. And I said, okay, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do the podcast interview afterwards. For sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So here we are, only a few days after the retreat experience. Aaron, thank you for taking the time today. Talk with me about your big passion. You are a Tantra teacher, a sexuality coach. You're author of The Embodied Man. Keynote speaker, and you lead retreats all around the world. What is beyond that? What is your mission with that? Or to maybe say it in the terms of, what we did last week, profound question, what are you seeding in the world?
Yeah, I love the question, and great to be here. Thank you for the invite. I think beyond all of that, there's a deep longing and desire to see both male bodies and female bodies on this planet like living in alignment to the wisdom inside their soul. I feel that we've all incarnated into this form for one reason or another, and my sense is a lot of people live with a lot of cake over their truest essence, and there's a lot of mask covering up really their most authentic self. And so part of what I do is help to clean away that which isn't love in their body, in their being, in their mind, in their heart, in their soul, so that their essence gets to be shared. And they're not on their deathbed wishing that, wish I did that thing, or wish I actuated that deep desire inside. So a lot of what I do is help people break down the unconscious patterning that's getting in the way and step into their true self so that they are living in accordance to the wisdom inside of them. And your wisdom is different than my wisdom, is different from everyone's wisdom. But sometimes our societal conditions, thoughts, beliefs, all the programming that we've taken on throughout our lives get in the way, and we end up living somebody else's dream. Right. Trying to be something that we're not actually inside ourselves. And then what happens? There's this built up resentment and frustration and emptiness inside, and people spend their whole lives, kind of behind a computer or going just through the motions and not really aligned to who am I? Who am I showing up as each and every day, and how can that truest essence be delivered in a way that's aligned to day-to-day life. And it doesn't need to be everyone doing what you're doing or doing what I'm doing. It's but if whatever we're doing, there's not a joy inside, and there's not an alignment inside, there's not a feeling of, yes, this is my truth being shared into the world, then my sense is something goes missing. So I'm helping people take away that piece missing and step into their deeper alignment inside.
Yeah. Wow. Can you take us back to a moment in your life, or maybe a phase, it probably wasn't only a moment, where you realized you were playing someone else's game, you were living maybe someone else's dream, you were out of alignment to your own soul's path? And how do you recognize? Because I feel it's so easy to stay stuck in those patterns, especially when you are not aware of them. You're just functioning, you're just living out the program that's been installed, basically. And when did you realize something's missing in my life? There must be a deeper level to that.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely a few moments along the way. What the story coming up for me is one of the stories that I shared in my book. So I went to a maritime academy. So I'm a ship's captain by trade. I spent years working out at sea, operating container ships and cruise ships as one of the navigators on the bridge. So I use navigation a lot, and just the way we move through life. And in one of those particular moments, I had just upgraded my license from a third mate to a second mate, so I could make more money. There was more opportunity. And right the day after I upgraded my license, I found out about a new job. I was in Boston. I'd just come back from Hawaii. And the job was going to fly me to Kenya in Africa on that Wednesday. And I was going to take a ship from Kenya to Buenos Aires in Argentina, and then from Buenos Aires to Israel. It was going to be about a 3 or 4 month trip. It was higher paid position. There was going to be countries I hadn't been to. Everything about it was on my values of how I was living life. I was 24, I think, at the time. And I remember I took the job. I took the job on a Monday. And it was like, yeah, this is perfect. Yeah, amazing. I told friends. I was ready to go. The following day, I woke up and my whole body, like the union hall where I got the job, was calling me. And I remember looking at my phone and I couldn't answer the phone. I was like, it was like, Boston Union Hall. I'm like, I can't answer this. And I knew inside that there was some part of me that couldn't go. I knew there was some part of me that was like, no, this isn't aligned. This is living something else other than my truest path. And so I just went inside. I went inside and I was sitting with it, and I was confused because my mind was like, more money, more travel, more experiences. But there's this deep pull inside that says, this isn't for you. And I sat with it and I sat with it. And at the time I had a partner on and off out in LA, and one of her friends had told me about this master's degree in spiritual psychology. And when I brought that program into my awareness, I just felt my body just start to light up, and it was like,
and expansiveness.
Expansiveness, yeah. It was just something about it. My whole body started to say yes.
Yeah.
And so, on that Wednesday, I didn't fly to Kenya and take a ship in Africa, a grain ship. I flew to LA. And that Wednesday night as well, they happened to have an introductory evening at the university. So I arrived, and went straight to the intro evening from the airport. And I remember just sitting in the back of the room, my legs were like, oh, this is yes. And I just felt this yes in my body. And I registered that night. And then a couple months later, started the program there. I bought a boat in LA and just started my whole journey in LA. And that to me was a very shifting moment, because it was a moment where I could have listened to the voice of my dad saying, keep a good job, make sure you keep, things, you're making money, and I haven't done that so well, so make sure you do that. The voice of all these others, just like, why would I not take that? But inside it was like, I knew that it was leading me in a different trajectory. And that moment opened up the whole gateway to self-development, to, the la-la land of LA I lived in for a couple of years, which had its beauties and as well as its challenges. But yeah, it was a beautiful shifting moment that opened up so much for me.
Yeah. Listening to what you share brings to my awareness the term embodiment, which is pretty much one of the foundations of your whole work, basically. Because you felt deep inside, and often we talk about that, right? Follow your heart's calling. But what does it mean? How does it feel like when your heart really speaks to you? And listening to you makes me feel like, yeah, this expansiveness, it just feels right. It feels exciting. The whole body kind of responds to it. And that sounds like you had that experience for the first time in your life, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How did that connect to the path that unfolded later on, also with Tantra, with embodiment practices?
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is a whole journey of many years, but maybe you can give us a little bit of some reflections on how that actually unfolded for you.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting is after that moment, I ended up going to LA, and I had 3 different kind of mentors that came into my life. And I was doing the master's degree, which is a beautiful program, University of Santa Monica. Most of their programs are online these days. Yeah. I started studying at Agape as well, which was this international spiritual community under a guy named Michael Beckwith, who's really like channeling the voice of God. And just like, I remember the first time walking in there, and again, my whole body lit up, and I was like, wow, this is so good, because it was just speaking to my soul. Yeah. And then I had another mentor come in my life then as well, Dr. DeMartini, who was a lot of like the science of the human experience. And so those kind of 3 schools of thoughts, understandings, really was just like a deep nourishment for my mind. You know, there were aspects of embodiment in it, but it really was just like this feeding of the consciousness into things I've been longing to study and dive into. And I was so thirsty. I was so like getting as much as I could. And after about 3 years of that, I had my coaching practice. I was seeing clients on my boat in LA. I was teaching meditation. I would take people out on these sunset meditation groups. And it was brilliant. Like, I was really aligned, and I was living, and this was, everything was expanding. But also, like, financially, things, I was finding my way. I was still a young guy. I was, 26, 27 when I finished up that program, so quite young. And I had a friend of mine in Hawaii call me up, and he was like, hey, do you want to come back to the ship, on the cruise ships? I'd worked out there before. And I remember thinking, and I was like, oh, like that. So part of it just felt like this nourishment of getting a paycheck every week. Was like very excited about, So I said yes to that. And partly, I was also very disillusioned. I was very disillusioned by the whole LA land and the whole self-development land. Because what I experienced, and this is connecting the dots to embodiment, is that, including myself, there were a lot of concepts I understood. There were a lot of things that I could speak to. And I was also working for this big self-development publishing company at the time, and helping authors around the world share their stories of gratitude for some of life's biggest challenges. And I found that I was witnessing a lot of people, including myself, teaching and speaking from stage, but their lives dictating something else. And I was like, this was all a joke. Like, this isn't real. People are just saying all these things, and there's just a bunch of baloney behind the surface. And I'm like, I don't want that. And I had to do a deep searching again. So I went back to Hawaii. I went back to working on the cruise ship. And I did that for about 3-4 years. And I'd worked for 4 or 5 months on the ship. I kept some coaching clients. And then I'd just pack my bag and get lost in the world. Into groups, into retreats, into just soul searching. And, I climbed in the Himalayas. I spent months in many different countries all over. And I was just searching and discovering and meeting. And, I remember a time I never wrote the book, but it's a book that's still alive in me. I was doing a lot of hitchhiking. Not because I needed to. I was just curious, just curiously meeting humanity. And like all the different caveats of that. And it, through time, I started to, probably later on down that road towards the end of 3.5 years, I met ayahuasca for the first time, and, felt this grandmother presence saying, I know you're enjoying Hawaii, you're enjoying your travels, but maybe you want to go back to doing the things you were doing. And I felt, again, this full body yes. And so I started leaning into this field again. And then I met, I had this beautiful tantric woman come in my life who really initiated me a lot into this path. And I started to see this world of self-development that I knew very well, that I still was very connected to, and my sex life. And I started to see, wow, there's some interconnectedness here. There's some places that some of the deepest fears, taboos, areas of people's challenge is at our lower chakras, our base. And so I started to meet some of my more uncomfortable areas around, sex, money, and power. And then through kind of having this initiatrix into my life into the tantric field, I began to open up more into, coaching and speaking and doing things like that. And then I started to notice that a lot of the people coming into my inbox were, especially men, having challenges with premature ejaculation and challenges in the bedroom. So I was like, okay, I'll just start to speak and work in this way. And I never wanted to be a Tantra teacher. I never wanted to be like, I'm going to be a Tantra teacher, because in many ways, Tantra is very misunderstood. And a lot of people think that, it's quite true. A lot of people use Tantra to get laid. Like, I got laid a lot more as a navigator, as a sailor, than I do as a Tantra teacher. So I'm very much the opposite, in that framework. And as I began to step into this field, I'm like, wow, there's a deep area for more integrity necessary, as well as I started to see a lot of the deepest areas of people's conditioning around their base chakras, and their conditioning around sex, around money, around power, power at their solar plexus, sex at their first chakra. And so it just led me more and more into this field of embodiment. And I met a couple different organizations that I now teach with, and I just stepped more and more into this field of embodiment. And I think one of the things that's kind of not unique, but more unique about my path as a teacher is that I had over 10 years of really diving deep into self-development and mindfulness and all of that and consciousness, and then met this field of embodiment. So I'm able to articulate what's happening in the body, but then also take people into the body. And that's what I feel like is really necessary in many ways, is understanding the mind and understanding how the mind works so that we can actually drop into the unknown of the body. That's a little piece of the journey of how it's
beautifully summed up. A journey of how many years? 13, 12?
About 15 years.
15 years now.
Yeah, I started that Masters in 2000.
One point I'd love to jump in before we go deeper into Tantra and what it actually means and why it's so misunderstood. But it sounds like you had like the mental approach. You had that mental gateway. You were studying spiritual psychology with all those amazing teachers. You started to understand greater realms of life and all of that. And I can so resonate with that also from my own experience. It didn't feel like it was me yet. I didn't feel like I was speaking from my own practice, from my own integration, my own embodiment. I was speaking from my mind, understanding different concepts, always feeling like there was something missing, something more true to that. And you discovered first that realm, then you got back into the body, and I think this is an interesting part, and you mentioned that in the retreat. That's something I really like about your teachings and your approach as well, because it resonates deeply, is you first want to master the human experience in this physical suit of flesh, as you call it, in this physical human body on this planet Earth, and then use this profound foundation to just actually start, expanding towards spirit and the greater universe. And what's often, and I think this is especially here in Bali, you can observe that many times, but in different areas in the world, and I'm speaking from myself as well, using spirituality oftentimes to escape, escape like the discomfort that sometimes emotion can really bring with them towards spirit. Like, okay, I just meditate for like half an hour and I get rid of those emotions. That's not what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, what I find is a lot of people, there's a big ascendant journey in spirituality, and ascendant is this part of us that often wants to not be in the body and ascend out of the body because it's been challenging with different levels of trauma that have happened in the body. So a lot of a spiritual meditative path, and this is a lot of spirituality and even religions, are taking people, they're rising in consciousness, which is beautiful. And one of the things I love about Tantra is it says, let me go here, but let me dive into here. Let me dive into the uncomfortable and the murky and the messy and the animal and the emotions and all of that. And can I find divinity there as well? Because when I was studying in spiritual psychology, I remember finding, points of enlightenment, whatever that means, in as a young man. But a lot of it was just this ascending, rising, and going into a larger kind of ethereal, cosmic energy.
Right.
But then there was still a disconnect, because when it came to certain conditionings around sex, money, and power, then I was still making decisions as if I was a 15-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Even though I was this ascending, meditative, rising being. And that's really what I love, is that Tantra really is a journey into the body. Yeah. It's a journey into the body, as well as opening up the crown and the third eye and all of that. But it requires people to meet their uncomfortability, and you can't just meditate problems away.
Yeah.
And this, unfortunately, as I see it a lot in spiritual traditions and spiritual practices, is that it almost becomes easier just to, meditate away and not actually deal with the conditionings that's happening in this flesh suit, in this bioelectric magnetic flesh suit. So what's more sexy and interesting to me is, can I really master how I move energy through my body? Can I master how I'm being with the kind and the cruel and the naughty and the nice and the good and the bad, and be okay with both of that, so that it actually meets at the center of my heart, and I can then expand my love into the world. But a lot of times love is looked at as this, there's going to be more good than bad. There's going to be a white picket fence at the end of the road.
It's not the case.
No, love is balance. Love is equanimity. Love is all of that. And actually an embodied love exists when I have an appreciation for the light and the dark, and I'm not afraid of either one. Yeah. So one of the things I often hold here in Ubud is a evening owning the darkness, where I take people into their dark body. And that's often not what happens in, a Buddha. It's a lot of, bliss, no, let me rise, which is great. And I love all that states, but I also want to merge into the dark place inside, so that I can find bliss there too. And I can find the deep love at the center of both.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of approaching love in its totality, in its wholeness. And many spiritual traditions speak about that too, right? Love is everything. Everything is love. And how can love then not be the bad, the ugly, the naughty, the cruel, And I know we had this agreement in the beginning of the retreat not to share any of what is happening in there. What happens at the men's retreat stays at the men's retreat. May I be so bold, though, to just mention one of the practices, approaching the dark masculine, actually. We met with the dark masculine. We sat, just to give our listeners a little bit of an idea what we were doing in this practice, because I thought it was so powerful. And then you can go a little bit deeper into what the dark masculine actually is, and how we can express it in a healthy way, both men and women. But we were actually taking on the role, channeling the energy of the dark masculine, and then holding space for another participant who would sit on the other side, and he would come with his shit. He would just unload whatever accusements and the anger and the guilt, and maybe there was a childhood experience and he was unloading all the accusations towards the parents, or the big pain of the world, and really crying it out, screaming it out, all the rage towards the destruction of the planet. So just to give an example. And then the dark masculine, I found that fascinating, because it's actually an archetype inside of us that we can actually connect with on a day-to-day basis. Is holding the space, but not Jesus-like, leaning back and, okay, bring it all on, and I hold you also my other cheek, that you can slap it. But it's actually cutting through the bullshit. It's a really powerful masculine force that's actually holding the space, but at the same time holding that person accountable for their own actions and beliefs.
And that was such a healing experience. So that was my view from a participant. Maybe you as a teacher can share a little bit of what is that dark masculine?
Yeah.
And how can we transform it inside of us into a more healthy expression to heal the world, basically?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love this conversation. I mean, the framework initially, it's like you and I are both in male bodies.
Yeah.
And inside the male body, you have a masculine and feminine essence. So there's also a feminine essence. So anyone listening, regardless of whether you're in a male body or female body, there's a masculine energy, there's a feminine energy. And however you want to put that into context, there's just different principles that are more associated to a masculine energy and more principles are more associated to a feminine energy.
Such as?
Yeah, such as in a masculine energy, our phallus, our cock, our vajra, whatever name you want to put to it, lingam, it rises to penetrate, to create life. The yoni, the pussy, the vagina, receives the semen, receives the energy from the cock to create life. So there's a receptivity to the feminine and there's a penetrative essence to the masculine. That's just nature's way of how we exist.
That plays out everywhere in nature.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So if I look at masculine, feminine that way, and then I look at masculinity in terms of a light nature, which as you said is kind of more of that like space holder, that Jesus archetype, that one that give me all of your issues, your sins, your problems, I'm going to listen, I'm going to love. And it's a beautiful energy. It's our capacity to witness without judgment and love unconditionally. And that is a absolutely powerful, potent energy in the world.
It's a masculine energy.
It's a masculine energy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when people think of dark masculine energy, they often just think of the unhealthy energy of destruction and raping and pillaging and kind of the annihilation of things on the planet. And in many ways, most of the dark masculine energy we see is kind of in an unhealthy nature. It's especially male bodies, but not just male bodies, all masculine energy, utilizing that penetrative power to have power over others, to wake up this penetrative force and then to say, wow, there's so much penetrative force and I want to destroy others so I can get the pat on the back, proving that I'm good, proving my ego.
That I'm a powerful man.
That I'm validating myself in that way.
Yeah.
And so part of what we journey into in this practice is a place of invoking those unhealthy places that all the beings have towards the masculine energy and towards that penetrative power. And then those who are embodying into a healthy role to the best of their ability are utilizing that penetrative power to destroy anything that's not love, to annihilate anything that isn't vibrating and isn't expressing at a place of love and accountability. And that means that it's not always looking pretty and clean and compassionate and Jesus-like. It's like, hey, I'm here. We're here together and I'm done with your bullshit. I'm done with all the things where you're not stepping up and showing your truest essence in the world. And this is one of the deep, powerful forces that's possible is when people do step up and they own their power and they say, hey, my feet are planted on the earth. I know what I'm here for, and I'm going to destroy and annihilate anything that's in front of me that's not supporting love and above on this planet. That's not supporting all of the other bullshit, all of the other, kind of atrocities and people who are just utilizing this penetrative power to validate their ego. So what's interesting to me is what happens when all of that falls away, and actually what the dark masculine does is it creates safety. Because the feminine in us all wants to know that we have a healthy protector, wants to know that if someone walks in the door who's not there for love, that we're able to take out our sword and annihilate anything that we need to. And that doesn't need to be violence, but it's in many ways, it's like, imagine two lions meeting in the forest or in the jungle. Like they both know how powerful they are, and they can just look each other in the eyes and take a walk away because they don't need to prove that power.
They don't need to kill each other so nobody wins.
Exactly.
They just show each other, hey, we are both powerful. We meet each other on eye level. let's just call it a day and, be fine, both of us.
And let's rise together.
Let's
rise together. And this is what's
beautiful.
So I find important that inside of these men's retreats is that when men's competitive spirit doesn't need to be utilized as a gateway to validate one's ego, and their competitive spirit can shift from competition into comrades, into, hey, you're a powerful brother. I celebrate, I salute you.
Yeah.
I know power because I see it in me. And I know there's things that you're going to be brilliant at that I'm not very good at. And there's things that I'm great at that you might not be great at. And together, we can utilize all of these unique gifts of our soul to express our wisdom into the world.
Yeah.
But that requires a strong being in the body sensation and vibration. And that's not let me ascend out, but actually I'm here in the body expressing the gifts of who I really am.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the sexiest thing that we can do.
It's so sexy. And I feel it in myself, and I'm amidst it. And I love that we actually have this interview right now. Like, I'm still in the integration process, and what I realized in the past days is I got more authentic in the access of my emotions. I felt I'm safer. I feel safe with my emotions. And now maybe reflecting a little bit from my experience and what you just shared to maybe give our listeners also a practical example of what that could look like. Because I had, and I discovered that last week on a very deep level, I was scared of my emotions most of my life, which is the reason why I was running away from them. I was distracting myself with alcohol, with drugs in my 20s, with a lot of parties, with also chasing women in my 20s. That was like my way of validating myself oftentimes, because I have not learned in my childhood what it looks like to access and process my emotions in a healthy way, because my parents weren't not really a role model. They haven't learned that either. They were hurt, they were overwhelmed oftentimes. There was violence in our family. So I just knew I never want to be violent in that way. And I was scared of being rageous or angry, so I was just distracting myself. Completely unaware. That was unconscious. It was like an unconscious program that was running out. And now, when it comes to the feminine, masculine dynamics, you said the inner feminine, and I think that applies to the outer feminine, to every woman in a man's life as well, wants to feel safe. She wants to be held, and she wants to be safe in her chaos and in her emotions. And my inner feminine didn't feel safe with my emotions and with the chaos. Which is why I distracted myself from it, because I was not in tune with my inner masculine, with my dark, healthy, powerful warrior spirit masculine that was able to hold the space for my inner queen, for my inner feminine, for my emotions. And what I feel now is it's balancing out so many practices we did in this week that actually enabled me to feel more safe with my emotions and express it on a daily basis. So maybe you can give us from your experience an example of what would it look like. Let's say the example of a relationship between a man and a woman, or also between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, doesn't really matter, right? What would it look like if one of the two is not really in a healthy relationship with their own inner masculine? Or on the other way, if the woman, for example, is not really in tune with her inner masculine, how would that play out in a relationship? Because I think many people can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of caveats to that. I would say one of the dynamics I often witness is that this inner feminine that's in a man's body often hasn't had a big seat at the table. And so what happens is man and woman, I'm talking kind of a heteronorm way, they come into relationship and they come into love, and they're then in the honeymoon phase, and it's, oh, you're my twin flame, you're my love, oh my God, beautiful. And then whether that honeymoon period is a month, a year, 5, whatever it is, eventually a point comes where like life, slows down a little bit, and there's more of a deeper mining of some of the stuff inside. And so this inner feminine, if she isn't being expressed in a healthy way in that masculine body, which is a big part of what I did, if all of the man's own inner feminine is projected onto the outer feminine, and you're the goddess and need to love the goddess, and oh my God, so beautiful, then eventually this inner feminine, she can get a little resentful. She's like, yeah, you're saying to like her speaking to the masculine inside the man's body, like, I see you loving this outer feminine, but what about me?
I'm here too.
I'm here too. And so if a man doesn't have context in that way, then what he's wanting, and often what the female body is saying, is that I want to feel you more. And you're always in your head, and I want to feel you more. This is what the external feminine is saying. So then the male body is like, okay, like, I'm going to feel more, I'm going to express more. And in that moment, whether it's a 5% moment or 10% moment, where finally he like goes into his emotional body and some tears come out, or some anger comes out, or something comes out that's either unhealthy or healthy feminine, whatever it is. If the masculine in the female body doesn't have a capacity to witness without judgment and hold space consciously, if this feminine in the male body feels like shamed or judged or ridiculed in any way, then she's never going to come out again. No. He, inside the male body, is going to put up an even bigger force field, an even bigger box around her, and saying, nope, that's not happening again. There was that one time where I expressed my vulnerability, and then I got, boom, slapped across the face and said, you're not a man. Right. You know, men don't do this. Men don't cry. Men don't express emotions. Whether that happened as a child, in relationship, whatever it was. And so that young girl just goes away and hides away farther and farther inside.
Right. And that slap that you just mentioned happened subconsciously in the woman because she was not in a healthy relationship with her inner masculine.
Yep. And so part of what healthy relating can start to happen is when both individuals, their primary relationship is their own inner union. Meaning my primary relationship, and you know, I've been in several long-term relationships, so even when I'm in a long-term relationship, I'm not currently right now, my primary relationship is my man and woman inside meeting and connecting and dialoguing and having their own relationship. And then when the external feminine is there, I love and adore her, and I love the feminine. I have such a deep appreciation. But I'm loving her, not forgetting about the queen in me. I'm not forgetting about the woman in me. And, you know, to take this even further and just to plant seeds of deeper conversation, this is part of actually what I'll be writing into deeper in this next couple of weeks, in the next book I'm writing, is in this relationship dynamic, you really have a foursome. So you have, you know, the normal kind of my masculine relating with her feminine, that's kind of the heteronorm place. Yeah. But then you also have my feminine relating with her feminine, kind of like sisters. In that relationship, what this feminine is looking for is a healthy big sister that's moving and expressing her emotional body in a healthy way. So women, if you're listening to this and you get crazy and chaotic and throw shit at your man when you're upset, then basically you're saying to the woman inside of the man, sister, this is what you do when you get upset. But if that's not doing it in a healthy way, then you're not setting a healthy example for the young feminine in the man's body. Right. So that means that when she finally feels like she can be upset, she's going to be a raging, chaotic bitch. Yeah. Because she doesn't have a healthy role model. She wants a sister that's actually going to express her emotions in a healthy way. Yeah. And this, you know, in my last long-term relationship, when we first got together, it was the first time I'd been in a relationship where when we've had our first disagreement, she would pull herself out of the room, she would go to the bedroom, she'd beat some pillows, she'd do her emotional process, and then come back into conscious communication with me. Yeah. And I was like, whoa. What the hell is happening? I've heard people talk about this before, but I've never seen it in action. Yes. I've had a lot of, you know, women in my life that talked about these things, but when they were upset, they still just projected all their shame on me. Yeah. And she wasn't perfect, but 90% of the time, that's what she did. And so in that moment, our sisterhood my young girl inside started to have a healthy role model. She started to have a healthy big sister who was saying basically through her actions, sister, this is what we do when we get upset. We don't blame, shame, and condemn the outside. We take responsibility for our emotions on the inside.
Oh, this is profound, man. And we beat the shit out of a pillow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's one of the practices we did so many times, and it's so relieving.
Exactly. And you're not hitting anyone. You're taking responsibility for the emotions that are in there. And so that's the sisterhood dynamic. The other two I'll speak into. The other one is kind of brotherhood.
Yeah.
Is a place of brothers aligning together, the masculine meeting one another and saying, and the first time I really met this was that I was living down in New Zealand years ago, and I was seeing this woman. We were living in community, and we were away for a weekend. And one of my friend's cars kind of had an issue with it. And, I've worked on a lot of engines. I've done some mechanic stuff. And, so we popped the hood, and I was taking a look and just seeing what was happening. And then I see her roll up her sleeves, and she's like looking at the engine with me. And I was like, whoa, okay, brothers meeting. Here is this like divine meeting of brotherhood happening in this moment. And that was a healthier example. Often the unhealthy example is that the male energy in a female body is often trying to prove itself because it's in a world where masculine energy is where we think we need to lead from.
Yeah.
What I say to women all the time is stop trying to lead from masculinity, lead from your femininity, and the world's going to change. Stop trying to be a woman stop trying to be lead from masculine energy, because if you stop doing that, then you're actually going to step up in your feminine leadership on the planet. You're going to step up into a new trajectory, and then instead of having competitive wars and alpha beating with masculine energy between each other, you're going to expand in the possibilities that's there in that brotherhood.
Wow.
And secondly, lastly, is a contrasexual relationship, meaning my inner feminine relating with her inner masculine. And 90% of the issues that happen in relationships are happening on the contrasexual level. It's basically one 15-year-old boy or girl meeting another 15-year-old boy or girl
throwing tantrums.
You didn't listen to me.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah,
This
blah.
is what's happening so many times. Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
Oh.
So that foursome dynamic, like there's a number of different books that have been written on it, and it really starts to outline more of the issues that are happening in the world of relationships.
And in the world in general, when I listen to you, because like the imbalance we see in the outside world in so many ways, politically, economically, socially, and ecologically, and an environmental level, is due to the imbalances inside of us, right?
Of course.
The imbalance between our masculinity and our femininity, and failing to actually approach both in a healthy way, because nobody ever taught us that.
Exactly.
It's such an essential thing. It's like the very nature of existence as you described it, but nobody ever taught us that.
Yeah, our emotional education, our polarity education, all of this is never taught at a young age. Instead of we're just taught all math, everything around consciousness, logic, and understanding. And I think if there was more of an emotional intelligence and emotional communication at a young age, we live in a very different world.
Yeah.
But we're living in a world that's driving towards more artificial intelligence and more mental cognition and all of that. So it's like generally the world, I find, going farther and farther away from the body.
Yeah. And more unhealthy, dark masculine energy taking over more power and all of that. Yeah. So to make this accessible, and also maybe to make a little contribution to this educational process for people who listen now, what could we do on a day-to-day level? So maybe you can share a practice. We already talked about beating a pillow, which is actually exactly what it is, right? You just beat a pillow as strong as you can. It was, to me, a new practice we did in the workshop. And I found that to be very releasing. It was a really nice way to just feel in my whole body the tightness, the tension of an anger or of rage, and then just beat that pillow as much as until I'm running out of breath, basically. And then suddenly there was some peace beyond that. And I was feeling this energy flowing through my body and being released. And that's it. That's what an emotion basically is, right? It's just energy flowing through the body, if we allow it to, if we don't hold on to it.
If we allow it to, and we don't try to intellectualize our emotional body, which is a lot of what happens. And just letting the body actually express what's there. So, a practice that I shared it in the retreat, it's also in my book, that's really changed a lot for me, especially around the masculine-feminine dynamic. In my book, I call it everythingness and nothingness. Just meaning that in the morning, someone can have a daily practice, 10 minutes is all it would take. 5 minutes, you put a timer on your phone and you go into your everythingness. You go into dancing, you go into orgasmic bliss, you go into beating a pillow, you go into whatever, sounding, breathing, nothing you're saying. It's just in the comfort of your own home, whatever, that erratic, wild self that just hasn't really been expressed, letting that energy come out. In whatever way, shape, or form, you're not hurting yourself, you're not hurting others. And you let that energy move through your body. When that timer goes off, you put another 5-minute timer on, and you just sit in silent meditation. So this practice is training both sides of your body, the masculine part of you that witness without judgment, that can just witness silently what's present and what's there. And secondly, the feminine essence that's just in her everythingness. And these two dynamics, these two places, is what brings polarity present in the body. And what does that mean? That if a male body is going into his everythingness in the morning, then when his partner, let's say, goes into being a chaotic, crazy bitch later in the day, he's less judgmental of that because he's like, oh, I know that because I did it this morning. There's a crazy bitch inside of me too. Oh, I can just love and accept and appreciate her rather than judge, condemn, and blame her. So this is a dynamic change that happens. So it gives people an embodied appreciation of polarity. And same thing, if you're practicing that capacity to just witness without judgment, when you know the everythingness, and then you also know just the stillness and the observer, when outside is getting a little bit crazy, instead of judging that outside, it's like, oh, okay, like the wind passing. Interesting. Oh, okay, there it is. Like a beautiful, strong, meditative mind. Both of those are very necessary for embodied integration.
And then even if you take it a step further, you watch the news, for example, and you see there is some crazy violence happening out there. Like worst of the worst. Let's make an extreme example. And what really shook me in the retreat is that when you said, we tend to judge that, of course, because it's not me. I would never do that. I would never kill 20 people. Or I would never be a corrupt asshole and, screw over a whole country, whatever it is. And then you said, hey, that's a shadow side that you carry inside. And that's the reason why you react to it in such a way, why you judge it on the outside. Because you have that inside of you as a potential, as a shadow, and please correct me if I'm not putting it in the right way, that hasn't been honored, that hasn't been seen, that hasn't been integrated yet. So maybe you can speak a little bit more about what we judge in the outside world we actually have inside, and we all, heard that many times probably, but to me that gave it a whole new level of experience, a profoundness to it.
Yeah, and that's part of, you could say, kind of connecting back to before, like the healthy dark masculine. It's looking at and recognizing the outside. If I'm judging someone as being a rapist and a destroyer, I'm not saying to go out and to do those actions, but to own the capacity of that energy inside of yourself. And then it's less judgmental as this is bad and this is good. One of the greatest quotes I love is from Rumi. It says, out beyond the field of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field, and I'll meet you there. And that field is a place of soul expansion, of soul enlightenment, of aliveness from inside. So when we can own
goosebumps when you share it.
when we can own our capacity to be a predator, to be a destroyer, to be all of that, then we're less judgmental on the outside, and then we can also make course corrections that can support individuals who have maybe made challenging decisions, and it's less like, oh, they're bad and they need to suffer forever.
Put them into prison and
yeah,
that,
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the most profound moments, I've had a lot through the years, is the university that I attended. One of the things they do is a prison project up in Northern California. And I've only done it once, but I went in, and it's a high security, maximum security prison for, this was female inmates. Pretty much, you know, everyone in there was there for either, you know, killing, you know, murdering, etc. Most of them in there for life. And we go in there for a weekend and provide like basically our 2-year education into a 2-day weekend. So it's a lot,
Wow.
but it's just like the basic framework of that. And I had one of the most profound experiences going up to that weekend. The partner I was with at the time, we would get into some arguments, and she at times would like come at me physically, violently, and it was, you know, it was intense, it was full on. So in the drive up, like we got into one of these arguments, and I had my own piece in all of this. Like I was far from being a saint. Like I was learning and growing a lot. And she came at me like swinging, and it was just like nervous system went into a bit of freeze. I ended up, you know, dropping her off at this retreat that she was teaching, and then I went up, you know, and I met the whole group. And that Friday night before we were going in the prison on Saturday, the people leading it said, does anyone have any like real-time experiences that we can do a demo on, you know? And I said, well, this is a situation like, you know, this just happened on the way up. And they're like, okay. So the following morning they came to me and they're like, we're going to use you on stage. So I went up there. I'm in front of probably 500 female inmates.
Wow.
And I'm doing this like deep, vulnerable process of like taking responsibility for my piece, learning how to express healthy boundaries, and like understanding kind of the soul curriculum in all of this. And I remember like coming into like complete tears and just like releasing and letting go, and just this whole process they took me through. And it was such a realization that like the women who were watching pretty much was an exact mirror for them, pretty much all of the similar situations. Instead of, you know, them escaping away, they pulled out a knife and they killed the man or whatever happened. So here I was like in this complete vulnerability, and it was such a change and a shift in how I move forward, because it was owning that destroying capacity inside of me. Like part of the journey was all of the parts of my own feminine that I wasn't owning. She was expressing in a very unhealthy way.
Right.
And so I was suppressing what she was expressing. And this is a big part of this work of like this collaborative dialogue that happens between two humans when they start to experience deeper love, is all the stuff that's not love comes up, bottling up.
Yeah.
And if it's unconscious, it's often going to come out in violence and in unhealthy, abusive ways. So it's accepting compassionately that energy, but then also meeting that energy at a similar frame to the place it was received. And this is really deep trauma work. And this is a big part of what I do in one-on-one sessions, obviously in group space as well. So, you know, there's so many caveats to all of this. And, you know, the biggest piece is whatever we're suppressing inside gets expressed on the outside.
Yeah. And there's, I think the bottom line of it all is like the human experience as a whole includes all of that, includes also those very dark energies that many people in the world express through violence and through actually like really bad violence oftentimes. But it's still an energy that is part of the human experience, and we can learn to improve our relationships with those energies.
Absolutely.
That's what, maybe that's a beautiful bridge now. I wanted to go into this topic much earlier, but maybe that's a beautiful bridge now to Tantra. So, as you said, it's widely misunderstood. Many people have heard about it, but always connect something sexual to it. And it has that part, but in your how would you explain to someone who has never been in touch with Tantra, what is Tantra in its core essence?
Well, there's a lot of definitions of the word Tantra, and one of the definitions that speaks most to me is to weave.
To weave.
To weave. And so Tantra really, in my best understanding, is a weaving of love. It's a weaving of life, of existence, of polarity into a place of love. So when we can weave and know love within ourselves, between our own inner union, masculine and feminine, we can know both sides of our polarity, our penetrative essence, our receptive essence, and they meet simultaneously inside in synchronicity, and there's an appreciation for it, then love appears. Love becomes present. And love becomes the energy to which we move from. So Tantra is love. Tantra is love weaving itself through life. Yeah. And the energy of that is it works with sexuality, it works with emotions, it works with the mind, it works with the heart. Like you said, often it gets only associated to sexuality, but it's just one of the areas of Tantra. Like, in a couple of weeks here in Bali, I'm running the Living Tantra retreat, which I teach with Embodied Awakening Academy. Every day is one chakra. But one day is more focused around sexuality, but there's still 6 other days. So when people say, oh, Tantra is only about sex, it's like, no, it's just includes sexuality. It's just that's also an area of life where there's a lot of dysfunction. There's a lot of poor conditioning. There's a lot of challenges. So we include it the same way we do with meditation, with, third eye opening practices, with heart work, with emotional work. It's just sexuality is one of the components of our body. We have a nose, just like we have a cock. We have eyes, just like we have balls. It's just part of our components. But because all of the different things around sexuality, it's like most people's education around sexuality is either pornography or religion. And both of which, in my perspective, are pretty poor. Religion says don't have sex, and whenever you do have sex, have it for a very short amount of time, only to procreate. And pornography says have sex as much as you want, and everyone's always wet and ready to go, and you shouldn't care about boundaries or consent or anything else.
Completely wrong image of what that is about.
Yeah, it's like where's the place in between where there's consensual, beautiful lovemaking as a journey into the divine, into actually a meeting with God. So Tantra in its sexual component, when it's met with deep lovemaking, when 2 people are unifying together at the soul, they're actually having a 3-way with God. And not a religious God, but, a definition from one of my early mentors that said God is a grand organized design. G-O-D. And that grand organized design is weaving love through life. So can I weave love through life into this grand design of existence?
Yeah. And it speaks to me a lot when you say that, because if you just really connect with what lovemaking is all about, like the biological way of seeing it, it's life creating. It's the creation of life. And who else creates life if not God? Like, it's like it's something divine that happens there. And in one ejaculation, how many potential lives are in there? How many seem like 50 to 500 million or something?
Yeah, around 500 million at a high, low
500 million. I mean,
it's a lot of little kids.
But that's a lot of life force energy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel this is also something when pornography, and I feel like it's really taking over. Like we had that question in the circle, like how many of you men, Damaraj, the co-teacher, asked that question. Do you mind me sharing?
Yeah.
Is that too intimate?
Yeah, it's fine.
Like how many of the men in this circle are actually or have been in their lives ever been addicted to porn? And like way more than half of the men step one step forward.
Yeah.
And I feel like, sometimes you feel weird if you do this, if you watch porn and all of that. It's just that poor education that you said. It's like a virus in our societies. And giving away all that life force energy with every ejaculation as a man, for example. What else could we do with it?
Well, we can do a lot with it. I share a story often in the book I wrote, a year and a half ago. my partner at the time had been making love every day for almost a year and a half, 2 years, and then she went back to Australia to be with her kids. And
wait a minute, every day for how many?
Oh, year and a half, 2 years.
Every day?
Yeah. Just having our lovemaking, having our connection together when our bodies were always, it was during COVID times as well,
Yeah. How did it look like if you feel like sharing?
Yeah, in the morning, usually an hour of connection. It doesn't mean we're having penetrative sex the whole time, but we're in, conscious union. We're in conscious, it's a morning practice.
What a beautiful morning practice. It's a spiritual practice.
It's a spiritual practice. What does it do? You're breathing, pranayama, you're moving, dance, movement, expression, and you're being with breath, sound, and movement, which is Tantra, which is all of this. So it's the best morning practice I can think of, and it brings joy and aliveness to the body. You don't need to be creating life every time, but you're creating connection that's bringing in, touch to the body, which opens us up, and yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful morning practice. So yeah, after making love almost every day for a long time, she went back to Australia. I had one of these men's retreats that got pushed back a month because of some COVID regulations, and I found myself with a month free. I just moved out of my house, and I thought I'd had this download on a whole vision for a book I wanted to write. I thought I'll just go and write it. And so basically all of that creative energy that I've been using for lovemaking, I then channeled into a book. And 350 pages later, and a bestseller in 7 countries around the world. That was a book that was created.
That's amazing.
That to me speaks to the potent and the creative power that is held inside. So lovemaking, I'm just about to go write another one in the next couple of weeks here. So yeah, I think it's the energy that brought you and I together, your mom and dad, egg and seed, meeting, creating life and having this moment now. It's like, it's a potent, powerful force in the universe. And I don't know of a more potent, powerful force that we can, utilize every day of our lives.
Yeah. So much potential in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I could go on for hours with you, obviously, but the Bali heat is taking on this noon, and it's getting hot and sweat's running, and I want to bring this to a completion with you, brother. Yeah. What is your what's your vision? What's a bigger vision you have for this earth?
Yeah, I love that. Bigger vision. It's back to what I was saying before with helping people master the human experience, wake the wisdom of the soul, and also return to the earth. For me, I just purchased some land up in the north of Bali, building a home up there. I love just having communion with the earth, and I think more people that can have communion with the earth and not concrete jungles, I think that we're going to start to do better. So I think people that can live and breathe in connection with others. We don't need to isolate. I think it takes a village to raise a family, not just 2 burnt out parents that get frustrated and annoyed with each other and then end up divorcing, and then the children just play the same paradigm. But rather, if we can have a more community Aquarian age, we are stepping into a new age in time and space and history, that we can return to the earth, we can be in communion with Mother Nature. And it doesn't need to be some hippity-dippity paradigm. It can just actually have a veggie garden, connect to our roots, connect to these beautiful trees around us. And, you don't need to live in Bali to do that. Of course, we live in a beautiful paradise here. But finding a way to, be okay and learn to express, move, and vibrate the things that are happening inside, and then share a deeper relationship with those around you and the earth around you, as well as your beloveds around you. And if you don't like something, then don't do it anymore.
Exactly. And really listen to that same voice that you heard back then before embarking on the ship in Kenya. Yeah. Your whole body vibrating, and the same voice that I heard before I signed up for your retreat, brother. only 10 days ago. And my whole body was like, there was goosebumps. My breath was so deep. My heart was pumping. I could feel it in my whole body when I was reading the description on Facebook. I just knew I had to do this, even though it was an unexpected expense. It was kind of not planned and, all of the things. My mind was kind of finding excuses. I'm so happy I did. I really kind of careful with, putting it that way, but I really feel it's been a profoundly life-changing and transformative experience. So, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. And make love, not
Make
war.
love. and thank
Every
you.
day, maybe.
Thank you for your courage to listen. There's a lot of men that, especially right now, that are struggling, that are suffering, that don't necessarily have a voice to listen to inside themselves. So thank you for setting the example of learning from that courage. And my deepest desire is the things you've learned and taken, you get to express and share in your own vocation, in your own social life, in your own world, to inspire a lot of men, especially on this journey. So thank you for doing this work.
Thank you for acknowledging that. And I definitely see this happening soon. There's so much life force energy inside of me that vibrates on a much higher level now. I feel so in tune. It feels amazing. Brother, I'll put all the links to your work, your book, your website, with all the retreats all around the world. There's also one in Prague. One of the men's retreats is in Prague next summer, I think. So that's quite closer to our listeners.
Yeah, Prague, Finland, Portugal. Those are the 3 locations for summer of 2023.
Put all the links in the show notes. Deeply appreciate you. Thank you for being in the podcast and sharing all of that with us.
Thank you, brother.
Oh wow, das war wieder eines dieser Interviews, wo ich am Schluss auf den Knopf drücke, um die Aufnahme zu beenden. Dieses Mal schweißgebadet, wir beide. Und dabei so eine Erfüllung in mir spüre. So ein dankbares Gefühl für das, was ich tue und eine Verbindung zu meiner Bestimmung, zu meinem Purpose und zu jedem Schritt auf dem Weg. Auch und vor allem zu denen, die manchmal einfach nicht verständlich sind, die unangenehm sind, die wehtun. Ich freue mich, wenn diese Energie beim Hören des Podcasts auch bei dir ankommt und dich die heutige Folge dazu inspiriert hat, einen Schritt weiter in deine Kraft zu gehen, in deine Freude und in die liebevolle Entfaltung deiner authentischen Wahrheit auf deinem ganz einzigartigen Weg durchs Leben. Wenn du jemanden kennst, der oder die dieses Gespräch gerade hören sollte, dann teile diese Folge, schick sie weiter oder mach einen Screenshot in deiner Instagram-Story. Share the vibe. Hilf uns, diesen Podcast noch mehr Menschen zugänglich zu machen. Und wenn du mir einen großen Gefallen tun möchtest, dann schreib eine Rezension auf iTunes und bewerte den Podcast mit 5 Sternen. Es würde mich unglaublich freuen, dort zu hören, zu lesen, was der Podcast bei dir bewirkt, wie er dich in deinem Leben inspiriert. Und wenn du 1000 First Steps gerne direkt und finanziell unterstützen möchtest, dann findest du auf community.jakob-horvath.com alle Infos dazu. Außerdem wird in Kürze wieder ein Platz frei in meinem One-on-One-Coaching-Programm, in dem du mit mir gemeinsam ein paar Schritte weiter gehst auf deinem ganz individuellen Weg in deine Einzigartigkeit, in deine authentische Kraft, in deine liebevolle Wahrheit und eine tiefe Verbindung aufbaust zu deinen Emotionen, deiner Atmung, deinem Körper und deiner authentischen Bestimmung auf dieser Welt. Mehr Infos dazu findest du auf jakob-horvath.com/coaching und unter dem Link in den Shownotes kannst du einen kostenlosen und unverbindlichen Discovery Call mit mir vereinbaren, in dem wir gemeinsam schauen, ob wir zusammenpassen, ob wir ein energetisches Match sind und wenn ja, wie ich dich auf deiner Reise ideal unterstützen kann. Vertraue deiner Reise, vertraue dem Prozess, lass dich ein aufs Leben. Das wünsche ich dir. Von meinem Herzen zu deinem. Namaste, dein Jakob.